Good afternoon. We are about to get started. It's good to see all of you are here. They're still gathering. We're going to ask if you will please take your seats. We do want to have the opportunity to present to you the pastor of this great church, to welcome us, the Reverend Dale Drumwright of the Temple Church. If he's not present, we ask if a representative will come at this time. Okay, he's here. He probably can hear me at this time. We're going to ask if he will come to welcome us.
Good afternoon. It is our pleasure to welcome Noah here to the Temple Church, and also to welcome Ms. Berry and Mr. Fox back to the Temple Church as we hear their positions and ideologies concerning the direction of our city. Amen. We are grateful that we have been given the opportunity to stand on this cusp in this time of history in our city, because we know this is a historical moment. And so we are grateful that Noah has brought us into this programmatic structure, and we're just grateful for the opportunity to hear from the two mayoral candidates. Amen? And we hope that everyone in here would be an early voter. Amen. Amen. Again, we welcome you here today.
As chairman of NOAA, I take this opportunity to again first thank the Reverend Dale Drumwright and the members of Temple Church for allowing NOAA to host the People's Platform today. And I also want to thank the runoff candidates for mayor, Megan Bear and David Fox, for accepting the invitation to come and participate. And I also thank all of you who have come to be a part of this political process to hear the candidates. I want to first acknowledge our elected Vice Mayor, David Bradley, who will address us a little later. And I also want to take the opportunity to acknowledge the council at large runoff candidates who are present. Those who are present, and I call your name, we ask that you will please stand. And if I don't call a person's name, is that we have not seen this person yet. Aaron Coleman, will you please stand? And we're going to ask if you will please hold your applause. John Cooper. All right. Okay, he's standing there. Erica Gilmore. I saw Eric. All right. Lionel Matthew Jr. Bob Mendez. And Jim Schumann. All right, thank you. And Jason Holloman, he's present now. Would you? He's present. All right. Hopefully we acknowledge the others when we see them. And we hope today will be informative to all of us who are present. And again, as the pastor Drumwright said, let us be sure to vote. Early voting begins on August 21st through September the 5th, and the Metropolitan runoff election is September the 10th. Again, let us get out and vote. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Carmen Emerson, serving the Greater Nashville Unitarian Universalist Congregation. It's my pleasure to be here. I want to ask you, friends, if who is my neighbor and how do I love my neighbor as myself are two of the great religious and ethical and moral questions we spend lifetimes answering, let us recognize that how do I help my neighbor thrive is the great political question of our time. And let us recognize the blessings that we cast upon one another today, the blessings of open hearts and curious minds that we bring to this conversation, the blessing of inspiration to speak truth to power. We are blessed to do together what we cannot do alone, and that is to make hope and respect contagious, to raise expectations that integrity will be the first part of any strategy we employ to make our neighborhoods better. May it be so, and may we be so. Amen.
I'm Rashad Fakhruddin from the Islamic Center of Nashville, and I'll begin in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. I'll begin with the supplication from the youth mentioned in the Quran who are not welcomed in their own city. O our Lord, bestow on all of us from yourself your mercy and dispose of our affairs in the right way. O Lord, please bless these two fine mayoral candidates, Megan Barry and David Fox, and guide them to lead with compassion and work tirelessly to make everyone feel welcomed in our great city. Amen.
Creator of our common humanity, you call us to be our brother's keeper. You commanded us 36 times, more than any other commandment, to be kind to the stranger. These aspirations call us here today and call our candidates to public service. May we remember these aspirations as we work for the beloved community. Amen.
Let us pray together. God of love, action, and hope. This body, Nashville Organized for Action and Hope, is gathered in love in this space today to advocate for the ignored, to bring power to the powerless, to give voice to the voiceless, and to elect the effective. Bless this place with your presence and our efforts towards action and hope with your power. In your name we pray. Amen.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Greg Easterly, and I serve on the board of NOAH, representing the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville. Before I get started, I just want to say from where I'm standing up here, I see a lot of power in the room today, and with respect to our candidates and elected officials, it's not just down here in the VIP seats. There's a lot of power out here, so I want to invite you to give yourself a big round of applause for contributing to the success of our meeting today by being here. So I'm sure you heard about NOAH's big mayoral event back in February, and you know that our goal then was to have 1,000 people present, and we actually got closer to 2,000 people over at 15th Avenue Baptist Church that day. So for today's meeting, we made sure we got a bigger room because it's really important for NOAH that every Nashvilleian gets a seat at the table wherever important decisions are being made. Now, you remember in February, all the candidates for mayor pledged to work with NOAH if they were elected, but today we're hoping to hear from our two runoff candidates about specific ways that they plan to address our platform issues. Today, we also want to celebrate some of NOAH's achievements during this important election year. First of all, through the work of our issues task forces, whose proposals were presented at our February meeting, we helped drive the discussion for the entire election season. And then we continued to educate the public and the candidates for Metro Council on our issues by holding public meetings with 15 council district candidates. And we got commitments to work with NOAH from every candidate who participated. We worked closely with our friends at A Voice for the Reduction of Poverty to help pass Metro's inclusionary housing ordinance, which puts Nashville on the road to ensuring that affordable housing is part of every new development. And our partnership with labor groups and promoting Amendment 3, the local hire policy, led to the most successful item on the ballot, with almost 60% approval by Nashville voters and broad support from throughout Davidson County. We certainly look forward to working with the Chamber of Commerce, with contractors, and of course our elected officials to make this work for both local business as well as our local residents. And as we look forward to building on these successes, it's now my pleasure to introduce NOAH's latest ally among our newly elected officials, Vice Mayor-elect David Briley, who will speak on his support for one of NOAH's key criminal justice proposals.
Peace be with you. Shalom. Salam alaikum. I had written sort of a political speech, but this morning I was inspired at church in this building by a quote that Pastor Drumright put up on the screen. And it's from St. Augustine, and I'm going to read it twice because it's short. It says, "The truth is like a lion. You do not have to defend it. Let it loose. It will defend itself." Sounds like I don't have to read it a second time. So I've got, there are 4 truths I want to talk to you about very briefly. I'm just going to read them. The truth is that too many Nashvillians are in jail. The truth is that too many of those in jail are African American men. The truth is that this situation is deeply intertwined with the history of slavery in our country. And the truth is we're just not doing enough about it, right? I'm David Briley, and when I'm sworn in a few weeks as vice mayor, I am pledging today and committed to working with Noah to see that these truths are overturned. We need a new set of truths in our town. Now, I'm grateful that each and every one of you is here today because it shows your commitment as well. And I challenge you to join Noah and the next mayor, who is sitting right here, to create a new truth in our city. And this new truth can mean more restorative justice in juvenile court. And Judge Sheila Calloway, who was in the choir today, is already working on that. We need to help her. We need better mental health care in our city, and if they would just expand Medicaid, we would make a lot of progress there. We have too many people in jail right now because they have a substance abuse problem or because they're poor, and we have got to stop that. And we can do it. In this city, we can still do it. So, Nashville can lead our nation in creating a new set of truths about criminal justice. And I'm here pledged to commit to work on that. I am committed for the next 4 years to work on that. If you will join me, if the mayors will join, which I know they will because they are here today, we will make progress as a community. There are no excuses left, and I challenge you to take action today.
And now I'd like to invite mayoral candidates Megan Berry and David Fox to the stage, as well as Elizabeth Waits, who will give the guidelines for the meeting today.
Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Waits, member of Belmont United Methodist Church, and I'm going to discuss the guidelines and policies for our meeting. First, it's important to understand that NOAA has not and will not ever endorse any candidate for political office. We endorse issues which we want to be a part of the political discourse. And the work we do is with that purpose in mind. Greg Easterly has discussed our successes, and David Bradley has discussed our concerns, and we've applauded and agreed with them. But for the rest of the afternoon, I ask that you please hold your applause until the very end of the program. We have a meticulously timed program for you today, and we want to let the issues and the candidates' comments about these issues command our full attention. For those of you who have a Twitter account, we ask you to follow us. Our Twitter handle is located on the back of your program, as well as our hashtag for today. The Twitter handle is @NOAH_action, and our hashtag is the decision. Lastly, we are now about to begin the question and answer portion of our program, which is what you all came to hear about today. After their introductions in a moment, the candidates will give a 90-second opening statement, and then will be asked 10 questions. The moderators will alternate which candidate has an opportunity to respond first to each question, and then we will move right on to the next question. After all questions have been asked, each candidate has 90 seconds to present a closing statement. Thank you for being with us.
And now we'll begin with the candidates' opening statements. Remember that you each have 90 seconds and that our timekeeper, Ms. Gwen, has her stopwatch today. And so we'll begin alphabetically with Megan Berry.
Thank you for welcoming me today. I was in church worshiping this morning with Pastor Windrow, and he said, make sure that your gratitude is not just horizontal, but vertical. So today I am grateful, but I'm also grateful. So thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. I want to thank Noah. You have been such a great voice throughout this entire campaign, and I fully expect that when the next mayor takes her seat, that you will hold her accountable on the issues that Nashville faces. If I am lucky enough to sit in that seat, our biggest challenge is not going to be what is our next big project. It's going to be how do we improve the quality of life and expand opportunity for everyone. And let me tell you what that means for me. It means access to good paying jobs that make economic investment decisions that result where local workers are trained and hired for jobs that have been created by their tax dollars. It means improving public education, and it also means I get to stop. So thank you. No bell this time, but I see that. Thank you.
Thank you. And now to David Fox.
Yes, thank you, Pastor Drumright and the congregation here. Had an opportunity to worship here recently. It's a beautiful sanctuary from that perspective. It's even more awesome from this perspective up here. A couple weeks ago, I had my 54th birthday, which means I've been in Nashville for 50 years. We moved here when I was 4 years old, 5 or 6 days after my mom passed away. And we came back to Nashville to be with my aunt and uncle, Lois and Gil Fox. They were Jewish, my dad was Jewish, and that's when I became Jewish. And what my Aunt Lois taught me is kind of the Jewish faith, the Jewish tradition of tikkun olam, which roughly means to repair the world. Meaning that as they talk to the rabbis, our obligation as individuals, how we'll be judged after we die, is based on how genuinely are we concerned about the welfare of other people and how muscular are we in our efforts to be of help to other people. So I would travel around with my Aunt Lois to the Grace Eaton Center and the South Street Community Center, trying to be useful, trying to learn how to be a good adult. And so that's the sensitivities I bring to bear to this. So in recent weeks, when people have tried to label me a Tea Party Republican, just shake your head and say you're out of your mind. My friends know otherwise. I'm delighted to be here with you today.
Thank you. So our first round of questions will come from NOAA's Affordable Housing Task Force, following a brief synopsis from Task Force Chair Dr. Paulette Coleman.
Good afternoon. It was exactly 373 days ago, on August 8, 2014, that more than 600 of us, citizen activists, convened at another temple on Harding Road, where we identified affordable housing as a major issue to be addressed and resolved if Metro Nashville truly achieves greatness. Since that time, members of the NOAA Affordable Housing Task Force have organized, conducted interviews, done research, educated, collaborated, advocated, and sometimes even agitated with the following results. Affordable housing is now a major political and policy issue that is covered widely through print, electronic, and social media. 2, some progress, but not enough, has been made to secure recurring funding at meaningful levels for the Barnes Housing Trust Fund, with Metro Council approval of a measure for fees from the Airbnb hosts being dedicated to the Barnes Fund. 3, the Planning Commission and Metro Council approved an inclusionary zoning initiative that begins with 180 days, with a 180-day study to define the specific provisions of the inclusionary zoning ordinance. All areas of the NOAA Affordable Housing Task Force platform have not yet been addressed, and thus the struggle continues. This work is not a marathon, it's a marathon and not a sprint. Working with the new mayor, council members, and people of goodwill, I wish for each of us good courage, strong faith, and much strength for the hard work ahead. Thank you very much.
So our first affordable housing question will begin with David Fox. You've heard our description of Nashville's incredible crisis in affordable housing and our proposed solutions. What specifically will you do to deal with this housing crisis, and what goals will you set for yourself on this issue?
Well, first, do we all agree that we have an affordable housing crisis? I think we do. Does this happen today? Right, it's been happening for quite a while. It's gotten worse in recent years. And so I think it's important to note as we get into the conversation that my competitor here has been on the Metro Council for 8 years while this crisis has emerged. Only recently have we seen progress made. We had a vote recently a couple weeks ago on inclusionary zoning. We have the Barnes Fund, but we've got to get some real capital into the Barnes Fund for it to have the significance that we depend on it for us to make progress on that. I think there are a lot of other things we can do, though. We don't have to stop with that. Let's offer incentives to developers. There's a lot of goodwill on the part of the business community, and if we give them incentives, gives them incentives based on density, I think we can see a lot more volume of affordable housing here in Nashville. Other things we can look at happens in other cities, protection from appraisal increases. We haven't really talked about that here in Nashville, but that is one of the biggest sources of the problem in affordable housing. As your appraisals go up, that's what ultimately leads to property tax increases. So let's focus on that. And let's be muscular in partnering with our nonprofits. We do locally at the municipal level, but also there's some nonprofits who provide help to seniors and other folks who may have income issues to maintain the quality of their homes so they're not forced out of their home when they come into disrepair. Let's also work with seniors so they don't get picked off like they're getting picked off right now. A lot of folks are getting bids to buy their house. They sell their house for a below market price. Then they can't find anywhere else to live. Well, let's in the mayor's office take goal of that, take charge of that. I think our goal should be to make sure that people who've lived in their homes for 20, 30, or 40 years can continue to live in them the rest of their lives. We can address these affordable housing challenges, but we're going to have to do it working together.
And now the question goes to Megan Berry.
Well, we've had a lot of economic growth over the last 8 years, but let's not kid ourselves. We have 17% of Nashvillians are in poverty, 40% of Nashvillians are cost burdened for their housing, and on any given night, you have between 2,000 and 6,000 individuals who don't have a place to lay their head, depending on how you count. Addressing our affordable housing issues are key, and it is a bold, multifaceted strategy that we have to use in order to do this. My good friend Jim Frazier has laid it all out in a pretty clear and concise way. You fund it, you build it, you retain it, and you preserve it. And that is how we tackle affordable housing. We do secure more funding for the Barnes Fund, and we find innovative and sustainable revenue streams to do that. We make sure that we do leverage the private sector with tax incremental financing and zoning incentives and inclusionary zoning. We make sure that homeowners can age in place and stay in their homes by using property tax freezes and engaging the not-for-profit community. And we prevent that displacement that we just saw recently with Miss Collier, who's a renter, who can't go anywhere else because her house is being sold. And we make sure that we continue this hard work that we've already started. Yes, we do have a lot of work to do, but this is not day one on this. A lot of people in this room have put a lot of hard work into making sure we could get to where we are today. We're not starting at zero. We're starting a little ahead of zero. But as a Metro Council member who has worked with housing advocates in the past, I understand the power of working together and not being divisive. I understand that in order to solve this problem, we need the best people at the table. And I'm committed to making sure that by working with NOAA and housing advocates, that we will make sure that Nashville stays an affordable place for everyone.
Thank you. Our next question, it's a two-part question, and our task forces have worked really hard on these questions, so I want to make sure that you get to both parts of the question. And also, I want to remind the candidates to please speak into the microphone. I think some people in the back are having trouble hearing. So the question is, how will you work with MDHA, the Codes Department, and other city agencies to develop and retain affordable and workforce housing? And the second part is, will this include creating an Office of Affordable Housing with community advocates involved? And this time we'll start with Megan Berry.
Sure. Let's talk first about the Barnes Fund for affordable housing. And I see Reverend Barnes here today. And I think on the Metro Council, as mentioned, we have sponsored and passed legislation that created the Barnes Fund, and we also created revenue streams like the short-term rental Airbnb and the new $5 million that will be put in there from the sale of the old convention center. And we are projecting more revenue for that. It's critical. But the Barnes Fund is woefully underfunded. If we look at where we go with Charlotte actually has a housing fund that has $15 million in it. Austin, $65 million. And the way they do that is by having municipal bonds and levies. Now, up until recently, the state prevented us from doing that. But our state, our local Democratic coalition here in Davidson County worked very hard to pass it so that now we at the local level can access those funds. And I will do that as mayor. Now let's talk about inclusionary zoning. We just passed legislation on the Metro Council to go to the Planning Commission so that they can come back to us with the best inclusionary policy they can. That is going to take a consolidated effort from both the developers and the housing advocates to work through that. It's going to be critical to have somebody sitting in that seat who can work with both of them. I've talked about this all along. Revitalizing the Office of Neighborhoods and Housing is critical for me, and that is adding the new component of housing to that, because I believe that we have to have strong relationships and accountability to bring all of those voices to the table. The forum today is called A Seat at the Table. As someone once said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I will make sure that you're at the table.
Remember to hold your applause till the end. Thank you. Now to David Fox.
I think when we look at the term of Mayor Carl Dean, a lot of people will look at, try to figure out his legacy, and they'll look at some of the terrific buildings that have been built, but that's not really what I'm going to be looking at. To me, his signature accomplishment, the one that I would be most proud of if I were he, was the Domestic Violence Task Force. You know, that's been a problem in Nashville forever. And until he and Diana Lance, Gene Crow, and others said we have to make it a priority, did anything really come together to improve the situation? So that's the model. And so when I think about affordable housing, that's exactly what we need to do, what was done for domestic violence. So you didn't come out of the box with solutions. You pulled together people all over the community. So you do pull together these organizations, MDHA and all the other organizations here, but people who are on the consumer side, NOAA certainly, NOAA's leadership, and come together, meet publicly, transparently, inclusively, and think through what does our city need to do a far better job of meeting the needs on affordable housing. I think what Mayor Dean pioneered with the Domestic Violence Task Force is exactly what we need to replicate for affordable housing. So let's do that. Let's create an affordable housing task force, make it inclusive, set high expectations for ourselves, and keep on monitoring it. I mean, if we do that, I think we can have the success we need. To date, we've had good ideas, but it's been sort of transactional. Barnes Fund here, inclusionary zoning there. We need a more universal approach to this. That's sort of how I approach things. From business, you put together a strategic plan, and that's how you get things done. So if we do this, I hope and I know I can count on NOAA's members and NOAA's leadership to take a very active part in steering us in this committee.
Thank you. And our last question from the Affordable Housing Task Force. We're presently losing affordable housing every day through tear downs in urban neighborhoods to create upper income homes. Elderly and low-income homeowners are often unable to repair their homes while paying rising property taxes. Some cities have created special property tax freezes for long-term residents, not just the elderly. What would you do to create more options for repairing and retaining our existing affordable housing? And we'll start with Megan Berry.
So we know we can't build our way out of this. We know that in order for us to move forward, we also have to save the affordable housing that we have. Recently, with the James Robertson building downtown, where we had about 100 units of affordable housing, we didn't have the opportunity to retain that housing, and that meant that 100 people who had been relying on affordable housing were left without housing. So we have to concentrate on the displacement of not only just homeowners, but renters. And we have to be able to let folks age in place. I think that's really important, plus it's cost effective. So when you start to talk about what's good for people and what's good for taxpayers, this is where we have that intersection. If individuals who can age in place have that social network, elderly residents, we know by the data, can avoid a lot of the costly professional care that it takes when they're relocated. Let's talk about property tax freezes. We do freeze right now homeowners who are age 65 years and older at a certain income level. But we need to extend that, and other cities and communities have done that. We have to say, if you are also living in a home that is a family home that you've occupied for many years, that you're not going to be priced out because the value in your neighborhood has exploded. As mayor, I will work to freeze those property taxes for those homeowners. And let's talk about home repair, because ultimately ensuring that people can stay in their homes is critical. We have to work with not-for-profits like Rebuild Nashville and engage our not-for-profits. But ultimately, as we move forward with this complicated conversation, it's not just about saying we'll do these things. It's about actually doing these things. And you want somebody who will sit in the mayor's seat who has a track record of having stepped up and led on these things already. Thank you.
Thank you. And now to David Fox.
Well, sure. Well, as you said in your question, one of the biggest challenges, the rising property tax burden that forces people out of their homes. You know, I'm not the one up here with a track record of raising property taxes or raising water and sewer fees. You know, these are big considerations that force people out of their homes. And so as mayor, I'll be fiscally very careful, make sure we don't have to raise taxes, won't force more people out of their homes by spending too much money and letting their taxes get out of control. You know, another thing I mentioned earlier is appraisal reform. That happens in other cities. We can do it here. That's ultimately what can lead to higher taxes. There's some thoughtful ways we can do that to limit the increases in appraisals so people are not forced out of their homes. But larger, I'd like to create something called the Nashville Way Foundation. This would be just a private organization. The mayor would take the lead in raising private funds for it. And it would do a lot of the things that we would like to see happen, but just really aren't happening with a lot of muscle. First is we could raise money to do more home repairs. As mentioned, there are some nonprofits in town who focus on this and they do a great job, but demand for their services far outstrips their resources. So in our Nashville Way Foundation that we fund privately, we can take a big whack at that. Then there are many other things we can do, many other needs that we know about. And one of the biggest challenges we have in Nashville, one of the biggest shortcomings, is what do kids do during the summer? There really aren't enough summer jobs for kids, or not enough summer internships for kids. Well, we could use some of the proceeds from our Nashville Way Foundation to do that. So those are the sort of ways I would like to proceed, and making sure we pull in the private sector in a very muscular way to address all the issues that bring to bear to exacerbate this affordable housing problem.
Thank you. And then our next section will be our Criminal Justice Task Force.
I'm going to ask at this time if Pat Harper, who is a representative on our Criminal Justice Task Force and also chair of our training committee of NOAA.
Hello. Over 25% of inmates in our metro jails are mentally ill, making jail the largest mental health facility in Davidson County. The General Sessions Mental Health Court since 2004 has grown from a caseload of 50 to currently having 260 cases. We should not be criminalizing and jailing people who are mentally ill. NOAA has also found that driver's license cases overly congest the courts and jail. 65% of misdemeanor court cases in 2013 were related to driver's license issues. Fees and fines for these violations often mount up to thousands of dollars and primarily overburden poor people. Then their licenses are revoked, incurring more state fees and preventing them from legally driving to work to support themselves and their families. Also, this city must acknowledge and address racial disparities in traffic stops and drug arrests that create resentment between communities and the police. African Americans are only 28% of our Nashville population. However, 39% of traffic stops and 44% of drug arrests involve African Americans. Lastly, Nashville has a school-to-prison pipeline. In 2013, 44% of Metro students were African American, but 72% of out-of-school suspensions and 77% of expulsions were of Black students, overwhelmingly for nonviolent violations of school rules. This is not only a hindrance to their success in school, but to their success in life. NOAA is committed to working with our newly elected mayor to reduce the Metro jail population and General Sessions docket by 50%, with alternatives to arrest, problem-solving solutions, and restorative justice options. We must also eliminate racial disparities in vehicle stops and drug arrests, as well as school suspensions and juvenile court referrals. We look forward to our seat at the table to work with you. Thank you.
We now have 3 questions to the candidates. Again, 2 minutes. All these questions are from our Criminal Justice Task Force. Question number 1. Some stakeholders, including the district attorney, favor amnesty and forgiveness for Metro fees over 1 year old for driver's license violations, other than DUIs. There's some speculation on how much of these fees are actually collected. If elected, how will you address these driver's license issues that mostly overburden the poor and keep them from being able to drive legally to get to work and take care of their families, beginning with David Fox?
First, NOAA, those of you who have been involved in the organization really ought to pat yourselves on the back. You've done such a terrific job. Like this issue right here, most people in Nashville were not aware of the vicious cycle, the vicious spiral that happens on these driver's license abuses, where you get a problem, you get fined, and they grow and they grow and they grow. So thank you very much, sincerely, for bringing this to everyone's attention. And yes, I think we do need to get to a system to where that is eliminated. We don't need people trapped in a cycle of fees due to a driver's license violation. So that's something that it's a fairly easy fix, won't cost us much money, and something I think we need to take care of. But to be clear, that's really not the big problem. I mean, the big problem was already alluded to. We sort of have a ridiculous problem of young black males being pulled over without cause. That's the problem, and it's immoral. And it's been going on for a long, long time. I've heard about it for years and years and years. So, we need to take these problems seriously. If we're going to provide good moral leadership to our city, it involves weighing in on these difficult issues. Let's study it. Let's find out why is this happening, because it's intolerable. I've had some personal friend experiences with this in the not too distant future. It's very sobering and very disappointing. So, this problem's been going along for many, many years. It could have been tackled at any point, and it could have been tackled at any point in the last 8 years of my other candidate's term in Metro Council. This is the issue. That's what you do in public service. You take the initiative. You go after problems. I'm glad we're getting to it at last now. It's long, long overdue, and I will do everything in my God-given power to put this at the right footing. This is not fair. It's not right, and it's not just, and I promise you we'll get on the road to improvement and take care of this problem if I'm elected.
Thank you. Now, Megan Barrett.
So this is an interesting conversation and one I'm very happy that we're having, because as I've listened to my opponent in the last several of his answers talk about being muscular and using his muscle, I think what we actually have to do is use our brain. And our brain on this
Please hold applause.
is to
Please hold your
know
applause.
that we know that raising revenues off the backs of poor people and trapping them in cycles of debt is unfair. And those fines have skyrocketed, but we have been making a dent in this. I met with Attorney General Funk the other night, and we talked about this. We talked about the fact that in 2013, 65% of our misdemeanors were driver's license violations. When he came into office, and over that time, he has reduced that significantly because of his policy and his approach, which I absolutely support. What we've been able to see is that those hours and days of people spending time in jail for these kinds of violations has been reduced by 4,800 days. That means 4,800 days that Nashvillians have been able to go to work and spend time with their family, and it saved us $1.4 million. A great example of, again, doing what's right and good for the taxpayer. My faith teaches me mercy makes the world less cold and more just. And I absolutely believe that mercy is what we need to do when we look at our criminal justice system. It has to be fair, and I will work with criminal clerk Howard Gentry and Attorney General Funk to make sure that we are not putting more and more people into deeper cycles of poverty.
Again, question number 2, again, beginning with Megan Berry. What specific policies will you and your administration pursue to address the racial disparities in traffic stops and drug arrests?
This is a problem that we saw manifest itself recently when we had the conversation about whether or not to put the police headquarters on Jefferson Street. Citizens have a rare opportunity to engage their government on things that matter to them. And at the Metro Council, you can come down and you can talk to us about the budget, and you can talk to us about zoning. But what we heard that night was a conversation about racial profiling and fear, and that was the opportunity for citizens to engage in that conversation. Citizens need a much wider opportunity to do that. And I believe that there's an opportunity to do that through a couple of ways. I will prioritize increased accountability and transparency with our police department. And that means making sure that that Office of Professional Accountability actually seriously investigates any allegation of police misconduct. But it goes beyond that. President Obama put money federally for us to go out and get body cameras for police officers so that they can record objectively the events that are happening. That means that you can see if you are wrongfully charging an officer or if you are wrongfully charging people. Both of those are critical. Second, we have to make sure that our law enforcement reflects the diversity of our community. And I will absolutely make sure that when I am in that office, I will work with a chief diversity officer and Chief Anderson to actively and intentionally go about recruiting, hiring, and retaining top talent that reflects our community.
Same question, David Fox.
Sure. Well, first, let's use our relationships with the state and federal legislators to reduce the sanction on low-level possession. I think most of us think it's sort of out of whack. Let's make that as a first step. And secondly, look back on the war on drugs. Again, 35, 40 years ago, some believe it started with a racial intent. I don't know. But what matters is we see the effect now. It has a brutal racial effect from the war on drugs, and we all know it. So in my view, if we see the results for the last 30, 40 years, see the ridiculous situation between the harshness of the penalty and frankly the trivial size of the offense, I think we would be racist if we in fact did not correct the problem that we've been living with for 30 years now. So I'm serious about that. Let's take that on and acknowledge there's a very harsh racially disparate effect on that. Howard Gentry, his office does a great job. Let's provide a little more resources to the criminal court clerk's office on helping expungement. And finally, recently had a friend, or about 4 or 5 months ago had a friend, African American young man going to work in a adjoining county, and on the way back was stopped by a police officer who followed him for 4 or 5 miles at a low speed. He was pulled over because he apparently turned his traffic signal on too late. And he had been taught by his parents, do what the police say. So when they said, "Can we search your car?" he said yes. So they held him there, called the canine police, had the police dog around 4 or 5 times. They said, "Well, okay, there's traces of marijuana on this cup." He spent 3 weeks in jail. He's a perfectly good kid. So these type of abuses are all over the place, and they affect everyone. They affect me, they affect everyone here. So, and this has been going on for some time. And this is not, again, these are yet another problem that just didn't happen today. This has been going on for years, could have been attacked any time in the last 8 years.
The last question, beginning with David Fox. Given that a mayor has little direct control over the school system, how will you work to eliminate racial disparities and break the school to prison pipeline?
The mayor has a huge and underestimated role in our public school system. And I learned that when I was chairman of the school board. The default behavior of an elected board is not always to get things done. They sort of protect the status quo. When you have a mayor involved to help hold the school board accountable, to work collaboratively where you can, then you see an appetite for change. And I learned that, front and center, working with the mayor to make sure we got some improvements. And we were able to come into a school system that was about to go into receivership. The state was about to take it over. Our board worked together collaboratively with the mayor, sometimes friendly, sometimes not so friendly, but that's what it takes to get better schools in Nashville. So I think that's the most important thing to understand going into this. So if we do that, we can create far more high-performing schools. Some will be doing all we can to make sure our traditional schools are more effective, providing all the resources, funding as generously as we can, but understanding this is an urgent need. We've got to apply the same urgency we do to our own children's education. We need to apply that to other people's children. And sometimes that might mean charter schools. And to the extent we've had charter schools, they're performing very well. Many of our highest performing middle schools are charter schools, and they're serving to date a disproportionately African American population, and some of the best gains we're seeing in African American children in middle schools are coming from our charter schools. So let's be open to everything. Let's just do what works, and let's apply the same urgency that we do to our own kids. Beyond that, at the state level, we have something, the Tennessee Promise and Tennessee Reconnect, that's of great value to adults. We have so many great job possibilities that people don't have the training. Well, now there's money. You can go back to community college for 2 years. You can be trained as an electrician, as a pipe fitter. All of these pay very good wages and make a good living. So let's polish on that. And I think conclude with a quick quote from Julian Bond, who passed away yesterday. He said it well: violence is black children going to schools for 12 years and receiving 6 years worth of education. Amen.
Megan.
Well, the first thing I'm not going to do as the next mayor is to eliminate an elected school board. And as we talk about what we need to do that is best for children, it's about making sure that the mayor can work with the elected school board to solve these very complex problems. And I think it's absolutely critical that we recognize that children are children. And when we talk about the school to prison pipeline, it's about remembering that sometimes our children make bad choices and they make decisions that impact their lives. And we as the adults have to make sure that their decisions don't impact them forever. I'm a mother. Earlier today, another mother stopped me and she said, I have a 15-year-old son, he's out of control, he's using drugs, he's been suspended, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know where to go. He's headed for jail, and that's not where I want him to go. MNPS has one of the highest rates in our country, of racial disparity, and we have to break that cycle. We have to establish a problem-solving center for student issues. That includes truancy, runaway, unruly, curfew violations, anything that we can intercede in immediately so that our children can get the wraparound services that they need immediately. We also have to establish standardized and appropriate guidelines for school suspensions. Kindergartners should never be suspended. We have to train our school resource officers, and as mayor, I will work with Judge Sheila Calloway to adopt the restorative justice programs that we need so that our juvenile court has the resources it needs for mediators and victim witness staffs. We have to break this cycle. I believe that education is the single most important thing our government does, and as your next mayor, I will bring the community together to provide those wraparound services and give the support that our students, teachers, and parents need.
Thank you.
And our final round of questions will come from NOAA's Economic Equity Task Force, and so we'll have some words from Benny Overton, who's the vice chair of NOAA.
Good evening. With income and wealth inequality at levels not seen since just before the Great Depression, with 20% of the population of Nashville at or below poverty level, with downtown Council District 19 witnessing amazing growth while also seeing the highest poverty rate in the city, with 16 of 35 council districts showing growth in poverty, with Metro offering millions in incentives to companies to expand or relocate here, often without clear or transparent accountability for benefits expected, with incentives to companies that are likely to pack up and leave once the incentives end or greener pastures appear. With these and other signs of inequities, the Economic Task Force of NOAA was compelled to develop proposals to address inequality and economic injustice. Proposals that ask us to institute local hiring and training requirements that fill jobs with under and unemployed Davidson County residents. To promote transparency and accountability in public proposals, in public projects, and in incentives given to companies. To attach defined, measurable community benefits to projects in high poverty areas. To expand the Mayor's Office of Economic and Community Development with a community building task force that promotes and supports employee-owned, community-held enterprises and cooperatives, creating jobs and assets that are firmly anchored to these communities and are therefore unlikely to pack up and leave. For NOAA, the overarching question for Nashville remains, is it just growth or just growth? Will Nashville be fair, compassionate, and just, ensuring the prosperity and growth it's now enjoying? Or will the growth and prosperity continue to largely, almost exclusively, benefit the privileged?
And now we'll move to our questions. And for this first question, we'll be starting with Megan Berry. The recently adopted local hire policy requires that contractors funded by Metro provide records of the number of jobs created, how many of these are local hires, and how much they pay. The question is, how will you ensure the same type of transparency is required of companies receiving Metro incentives to expand or relocate here?
In your summary, you referenced District 19, which is Council Lady Erica Gilmore's district, and she has seen both the good of growth and the challenges of growth. And I think she is an important part of how we are going to continue to make sure that there is the representation and continuity on our next Metro Council. She has that power and that strength and that ability. And when we think about what we have to do to continue to look at Nashville's growth, taxpayers have to have a seat at the table. And when we have that seat at the table, we can make sure that we have transparency. We can make sure that when we are giving any kind of incentives, that we are honest with taxpayers about what that cost-benefit analysis is. When Council Lady Gilmore and I sponsored legislation in 2012 to require contractors and companies to open their books, We did it so that we could make sure that they were delivering on their promises. If companies aren't paying a good wage, if they're not creating the jobs they've promised, if they're not adding value to the surrounding areas, if they're not doing what they said they will do, we have put in strong clawback provisions. That means we get that money back. We get that money back for our city, and we make sure that they're adhering to what they said they were going to do. I have spent my corporate career making companies ethical, making them accountable, and making them transparent. I will embody those same principles in the mayor's office and make sure that when we do enter into these deals, they're transparent and accountable.
And now for David Fox.
Sure. As a journalist for many years, as a reporter, I put a lot of emphasis on transparency. So it's something that I expect to see in all facets of government. When I was on the school board, I think we did a good job of establishing high levels of transparency, and I think it deserves to be the case here. Now, on Amendment 3, I mean, does everybody know that that does not apply to out-of-state workers? You know, so whenever we do a contract, if somebody wants to do business here, you know, it doesn't apply to out-of-state workers. And so what essentially we've done is we've passed something that sounds great. I think we're all for more local hiring. But now we've favored essentially out-of-state contractors who will use out-of-state employees. And so this is kind of happens from time to time. We have a well-intentioned proposal that in my view is not real sound. It's going to actually, in my view, lead to less work for local businesses and less employment by local workers. So I wish people knew that, you know, going into it. There was some conversation about it. There was some media coverage. There was reasons why the business community was fretting so much. It wasn't simply looking after their bottom line. It was concern of how do we staff? How can we compete with other people? And so, you know, as a mayor, we've got to make sure we don't fall for stuff like this. It's more important to do the right thing, to do something that feels good or sounds good or is politically solid. Unfortunately, this is not going to help us. This is going to economically hurt us. This is going to cost jobs.
Thank you. Our second question. The number of working poor in Davidson County continues to grow annually, with many service jobs having poverty-level wages and no protections for fair treatment. What will your administration do to ensure fair treatment for hospitality workers, service employees, and construction laborers, as well as wages that will lift this burden of poverty from our county? And we'll start with David Fox.
Well, sure. Sort of like the last situation where we had Amendment 3, which I believe, based on my study, it's a nice show, but it's not going to lead to results. We've got to make sure we do things that actually lead to results. My opponent did pass a living wage bill, and it got quite a bit of attention, but it affected 14 people. You know, that's not really something that moves the needle. It doesn't have much to do with the quality of life or people's economic wherewithal. So let's do things that move the needle. And I think we all know what really moves the needle on economic development and people's finances is making sure we do the big lift on public education, because education pretty much drives people's incomes. The higher your education level, the more money you make, the more flexibility you have, the more ability you have to chart your own course in life. So, you know, that's what I think we need to focus on. If we really care about raising the average wage in Nashville, it's not to do something that's kind of politically attractive. Let's do something that actually makes a difference. And as I said before, if we weigh in, work with the school board, the commissioner of education, to make sure we provide excellent schools for all kids, and then partner with the state to make sure that with people want to go to community school or technical college, they can have the training to do so. That's how you make a big difference. You know, I'm running for mayor to get something done. You know, I've enjoyed being in business, but I think this is an opportunity to maybe hopefully leave the city better than I found it. So I'm not really too interested in passing proposals that sound good, make for a good political speech, but don't really help people. And so I think that's the area we have to go if we want to really improve people's quality of life.
Thank you. Megan Berry?
Let's talk about Amendment 3 for just a second, because it did pass overwhelmingly. And I think that the scare tactics that some of the opponents may use to talk about what it does and doesn't do aren't true. And boy, I tell you what, it did pass, and it is going to be legislation that we're going to have to work through. And it's going to be critical that you have somebody sitting in that mayor's seat who has the support not only of the business community, because I got endorsed by the Nashville Business Coalition, but I'm also endorsed by the unions. It's that bringing the collaborative spirit together to make sure that we can find the way through so that companies aren't punished, but workers get jobs. It's about moving that needle. So when we talk about the question and we talk about fair wages, my opponent is right. I did pass the only fair wage bill that this community has ever seen, because when I passed that, we had people in Metro government who made a wage that put them at the poverty level. I didn't think that was right, and it needed to change. When I did that, the state immediately took an action and said, you know what, local municipalities can't sponsor a broader wage. So here's our next challenge. Right now, the state has that voice. We have to work with the state. We have to get the state to say it actually does cost more than $7.25 to live. And as Secretary Labor Perez just said, no one who works full-time should ever live in poverty. And those are the problems we need to solve.
Thank you. And now our last question from the Economic Equity and Jobs Task Force. NOAA's platform includes expanding the Mayor's Office of Economic and Community Development to include a task force that will foster the development of employee-owned, cooperative, and community-held enterprises. And this is a two-part question. The first one's easy. It's yes or no. Would you create such a task force? And then the second part, how will you build the wealth and assets of low-income communities? And this time we'll start again with Megan Mary.
The first question is yes, absolutely. And the second question, when it comes to building wealth and assets in underserved areas, we have to be willing to invest in those areas, just like we did in downtown. We now have to take that prosperity all the way to the county line. On Metro Council, we've started that process by doing the connector, the 28th Avenue connector. We've done it by introducing and passing the redevelopment district for Bordeaux. I see Lionel Matthews here, who sponsored that. And we have made strategic investments all across our county to make sure that we have the ability for people to work and live and play. With the passage of Amendment 3, I want to make sure that we have better oversight in our large construction projects to make sure that small and minority-owned contracts are getting their fair share of business from our public projects. We have to promote development along our pikes and corridors, whether that's on Jefferson Street or Nolensville Pike. We have to expand our opportunity by increasing our transit system, by resulting in more mixed use and more affordable housing and more retail space. We have to remember that community development is just as important as economic development. And in my administration, that Office of Economic Development will be heavy on the C as well, the community development as well. I don't want us to degrade the life that we cherish, but I also want to make sure that our growth continues in a way that we can all benefit from.
Thank you. David Fox?
First, yes, I think the task force on ECD does sound like a good idea. I would support that. And secondly, yes, definitely support the idea of building wealth for low-income people and presumably try to do it for more than 14 people. There are a lot of things we can do. One thing we do is create enterprise zones. You see those in various other parts of the country where you provide incentives for businesses to come in and to create jobs, create wealth. So that's a good start. And while we do this, let's make sure we listen to residents. Let's don't come in with assumptions and say, well, here's a great building for you without asking. Let's make it very much a conversation. So I think let's always make sure we infuse this dialogue in anything we do in city government, especially from the mayor's office. Because a lot of good ideas, most of the good ideas, frankly, aren't going to come from the mayor's office. They're going to come from the people. We talk about TIF, pretty controversial of late. TIF's had a pretty powerful effect downtown. 30 years ago or so, when they started the first big TIF projects like the Batman building, made a difference. You know, downtown could use some help, and I think we benefited from it. Downtown's pretty well developed, last time I saw. We have some other parts of town that could use it. Jefferson Street, North Nashville, that could use some additional TIF money. Both sections of the Jefferson Street TIF zone. So let's do that. Let's don't throw TIF out, but let's do it where we really need economic revitalization. There's something called the Entrepreneur Center in town, which helps craft small businesses, but there are certain kind of businesses that kind of grow fast and usually get sold. Well, let's use those same talents the skills, the resources, the mentorship, the capital, and bring those to parts of town where people don't grow up with entrepreneurship. See, I've been lucky. We've been entrepreneurs for 200 years in my family. It's sort of in our blood. But if you don't grow up like that, you don't know what's possible. You don't know you can take that risk and become a business person. So let's put incubators in various parts of town and accelerate the entrepreneurism. Finally, I was asked, well, I'll stop with that because it's my stop sign. Okay.
Now we have our last question to you, and we will begin with David Fox. Why should NOAA voters choose you over your opponent?
Well, as you have seen, I speak pretty plainly. I say what I believe. I'm not the most eloquent speaker, but at least I say what's on my mind. And I don't expect on day one to be trusted. I was in Hadley Park last weekend and told people, said, politicians troll through here every 4 years. Why should we trust you? And I said, well, you shouldn't. You ought to be skeptical and cynical. You ought to wait to see what we do in office before you have complete conviction in what we do. It's my intention to earn your trust, not with my words, but with my actions in the first few years of my term. I've been lucky. I've led a pretty privileged life in Nashville. I think others should be able to benefit from the city the same way I have. It shouldn't be just those who've been born into a good zip code or good area code. So I'm not here to do things that just look good on paper, that maybe just look good politically. If that were the case, I would just have stayed at home and continued in business and generated an income for my family. My belief in God and my Jewish faith compel me to have compassion and concern for other people, to help repair the world, as my Aunt Lois taught me. And that starts in Nashville, Tennessee. That's why I served on the school board. That's why I'm running for mayor. So I'll leave it up to you to decide who is the better candidate for you. But I do have something else on my mind that bothers me. I've been here for 50 years, and I've got a lot of friends. And one of them just told me very recently there's a new PAC that's been formed by Will Pinkston, who's a big supporter of my opponent. And I've learned what the intent is, to spread a lie that someone once said about me. Someone once claimed I said, black kids can't learn. Well, it's nonsense, just the opposite of what I believe. I've never felt that way. I've never said anything that could be honestly misunderstood to be that. In fact, my passion for public education is based on the fact that we have so many brilliant young children who have vast potential that they're not able to fulfill because the adults haven't gotten the job done. So I want to get out in front of that, speak from my heart, so you know where we are before you see that sort of despicable stuff.
Thank you. Megan Berry.
Well, I'm going to speak about why my opponent and I are different, but I'm going to say I'm happy to hear that he doesn't like super PACs. First, I believe that we don't need to put
Please
the
hold your
growth
applause.
on Nashville moving forward. My opponent believes in austerity, and austerity usually means that the people who are the least served suffer the most. I believe in continuing to make sure Nashville grows and that we all prosper. I believe the next mayor has to have a deep understanding of government and a deep understanding of business, and I bring both of those to the table. I have served on the Metro Council over the last 8 years, and we have done some pretty incredible things for this city, but there is a lot more work to do. I believe that what we need is a government that works. I know where our government works, and I know where it doesn't work, and I'm committed to making it better. I won't have a day one. My day one will be a continuation of the service that I've already brought to this community. We need a mayor who is honest. We need a mayor who is honest with the public, who is proud to acknowledge that our status as an IT city is one thing, but to also acknowledge that we have many areas that we need to address, and that includes affordable housing, transportation, public education, the places where we fall short. But we also need a mayor who is optimistic about the power that is in this room and the power we all have to make Nashville a place where it doesn't matter where you started your life. It doesn't matter what your economic status is. It doesn't matter what your education level is. It doesn't matter who you are or who you love. It matters that you are a Nashvillian and that we are all Nashvillians. And I will work with each and every one of you to make sure that our prosperity goes all the way to the county line.
Now we have the opportunity for both candidates to have their closing statements of 90 seconds, again, beginning with Megan Berry.
Thank you again for having us today. This race is critical. As we move forward, I hope that we can all partake in a conversation over the next several weeks that is productive, optimistic, and honest. I want to be your next mayor. I want to work closely with Noah so that we can solve the very complex challenges that we face. But it doesn't matter if you're not in this room today. It matters that you are part of the conversation no matter where you are. I am someone who can bring people together. I am someone who has the support of lots of parts of this community. That is going to be key as we move forward. I want to work with you. I want to earn your vote. If you voted for me last time, thank you. If I was your second choice, I would love to be your first choice this time. Thank you again. I am truly grateful.
David Fox.
I have great confidence in our community coming together to solve some of our biggest, most challenging problems. Being Jewish, I was raised to believe that faith-based social action is the way you solve these problems. I've seen the power of this all my life. I care deeply about people. I think deeply about challenges. And I'm careful before I draw conclusions or answer questions. Sometimes that means I support answers that aren't always politically popular, like effective charter schools and public education. And I support those in addition to supporting our traditional public schools. Because the need for urgency is so great, we can't fail to use any tools at our disposal to help children who are deserving of a high-quality public education. That's part of our Repairing the World concept. So is creating a Nashville Way Foundation to provide funds to help kids during the summer, to have internships and jobs, to provide funding to help older folks, lower income, be able to stay in their homes so that the affordable housing crisis does not force them into another county. And it also means partnering with NOAA to fix the issues of criminal justice and affordable housing and economic disparities. I haven't been on the Metro Council for the past 8 years while these problems have festered and gotten worse. I've done all I could for schools for 4 years on the school board. Now I'm eager to do anything I can to help our city as mayor. So that's why I'm running for mayor. I look forward to partnering with you and other organizations to see if we can make the next 10 or 20 years in Nashville even better than the last. I'll be grateful for your vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. As Reverend Sinkfield will come now, let us give these two candidates a round of applause.
Before there is this great haste to the door, please have your seat for just a moment. This has been a marvelous event that NOAA, Nashville Organized for Action and Hope, has put on that is important for the life of our city and for the life of all who are served in our city. There are two things that we need from you on today, and that is, first of all, there are over 40 organizations that make up NOAA, representing around 10,000 people in the city of Nashville. But we still are anxiously awaiting and needful of more organizations to join NOAA, to lock hands with us, and enable us to continue to be a support and an advocacy group for the city of Nashville and for the betterment of Nashville. If there are organizations represented in this room who would like to join NOAA, we want to give you that opportunity today. The second thing, though, that we need is we need you to help to continue to support us financially. A wise sage said that where a person's treasure is where their heart is also. We're asking you, if you treasure the work that NOAA is doing, to support us tonight. There are ushers that are coming down now. If the ushers would come, let us prepare ourselves now, if you can. There were envelopes placed in your bulletins where you can fill them in and put a gift to Noah in those envelopes. We would certainly appreciate it if you would support the work of Noah. If this has been significant to you, and if what you've seen Noah do over the last several months has been significant to you, then support us with your gifts. Those of you who would like to also join Noah, you can use the same envelope to put on there an interest in being a part of Noah. We will follow up with you, and we will make sure that the necessary documentation is gotten to you so that you can become a part of this wonderful organization that is doing what it can for the good and the betterment of the city of Nashville. The ushers are passing among you now. If you will assist them and help them so that we can do this expeditiously, but that you will also be generous in your gifts, we would certainly appreciate it, and it would go a long way towards helping us for the work that we're doing in this city. Those of you who must leave, if you don't mind, you can drop your gift in one of the ushers' baskets on your way out. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So since we're losing folks quickly, if you look on the agenda, what we wanted to talk about briefly is just some of the accomplishments that Noah's done just since February to try to make it local for here. In February, I think they're turning off the music. Thank you. In February, we know that we gathered in the middle of that snowstorm, and we all came together at 15th Avenue Church to hear from what was then 6 mayoral candidates, and Noah was able to really shape a lot of what that discussion was about. And then over the summer, we met across the city in different council races, and we did also work with organizations here in town to pass Amendment 3. So we feel like we have continued to organize and educate ourselves as a city for the past few months. Going forward, we also want to acknowledge the different traditions that we bring to this organization. And one of the traditions that we bring is that we organize and educate within each organization around the city. And one of the traditions that I bring out of the labor union is something we call the Solidarity Clap. And this started when workers were scattered across agricultural fields, and the bosses didn't want them to get together and have conversations. So after the bosses would leave, workers would know it was time to get together when they would hear a low, slow clap. So they'd hear it, and the next folks would start, and it would get louder and faster. And as it got louder and faster, the workers knew that they could come together, and they could talk, they could organize, just as we are organizing. We will vote. We will vote. We will vote. We will vote. And that's how we're going to have a seat at the table and change the power in this city to have one city for all Nashvillians. Thank you for coming tonight.